Welcome to another episode of Sinistral Rifleman. Not in range. But whatever. What it is we did a video recently talking about the new KE Arms lowers that have the ability to take a folding stock.
Correct.
And oh my goodness, the questions that started coming in about, can I do this? Can I do that? What happens if I do that? Why is this now blah, blah, blah. So what we're going to do is address all that here, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. What do we start with? I'll start with it. I'll ask you the questions. I'm the guy. You cut the stock off, it's going to break now.
Well, the thing with bufferless uppers is they're not imparting force on the lower the same way that a buffer system does. When you have a reciprocating buffer and the buffer bottoming out at the back of it, every time that bottoms out, what it's making the stock do is do that. It's pulling it down. And if you have a traditional AR-15 operating system with the buffer tube threaded into polymer, over time that force load cracks the top of the receiver tower or it cracks through the rear takedown pin.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about during the What Was Done to project, but also when we talked about just the KP-15 in general, was the reason it was a polymer lower that was strong was because it was monolithic, meaning you'll see other people, I'm not going to mention names, that they just take an AR-15 lower, make it out of plastic, and then thread an aluminum buffer tube into that. That's no bueno.
No, it doesn't work. When I was at Cav Arms experimented with that back in like 2000, 2001, and for anything other than 22s, it just broke.
The point being is that when you thread a buffer tube into this and you have that extension on here, that actually is fragile. But when you've done what you've done here, where you've added a plate and put that stress load across the entire rear of the monolithic polymer lower, you've distributed that in a way that this isn't that.
Well, and the operating systems of these bufferless uppers don't impart the same amount of force. Yeah, there's a bolt coming back, there's a rubber plug in this FM products, for example, that it's impacting against, but it's not the same amount of reciprocating mass or same amount of impact as a traditional AR-15 buffer system.
Fair enough.
And then you go, different uppers have other recoil absorbing features inside of them, like the Matador Arms upper I use at CQB Brutality. That has a rubber bumper in the upper before the bolt even comes back and interfaces with the lower at all.
So it's absorbing the blow before it ever bottoms out at the back.
Yeah, or things like the BRN 180, like they have a plastic plug in the upper that the bolt carrier bottoms out against that too. So it's not imparting force on these things the same way. And in fact, there's a number of polymer lower, but it's not the actual firearm in these more modern designs like the SCAR, where it's working more like a fire control group at this point with the recoil system contained in the upper.
Okay.
So that's not something I'm concerned about. Also, as we talked about in the other video, one of the IRTV patrons that attends Brutality matches modded one himself years ago.
Yeah.
Has put a lot of rounds through it, taken it to Brutality matches, a number of uppers on it. So he basically did the beta testing for us before we ever even got on this project.
That cool human prototyped it before it ever became this product.
Yes.
And as we said in the other video, you didn't steal that from them. You asked if it was cool, and they were cool.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not like that wasn't a big. You're like, I like this idea. Can we do this? And they were like, sure.
Yeah. Confluence of one of the engineers was brainstorming about this, and I'm like, yeah, somebody's already done that, so we don't need to work on it as hard. Let's just move forward with it.
All right. The next question, which is the harder one to answer, is, can I use X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, X, Y upper on this? So what is this? So let's start with the KP-15. What uppers do work on this?
So in 5.56 currently, the two types of uppers that work with it are FM products.
FM products.
Yeah, Foxtrot Mike.
This,
and
yeah.
And the BRN 180.
The BRN 180. So if you have either of those, you can just drop it on there and good to go.
Yeah, and when you order it, we configure the plug facing a different direction based on which upper you're going to use.
So you need to know which one you're going to use it with.
Right. There's the potential to unbolt it and change it later, but the way we're currently assembling these, epoxying the plug in as part of the installation, it becomes a little more difficult to remove it.
So when you buy the lower, you should specify, I'm using it with an FM products upper or a BRN 180 upper.
Right.
Okay.
Now the other thing that you can use it with is 22s, because 22 bolts do not reciprocate into the buffer system at all. They're all self-contained in the upper. So just about any 22 you could imagine should work on this. You might have to put a little bit of a rubber spacer at the back to hold the bolt forward into the upper, depending on how your particular bolt is. But That's kind of a known thing with 22s, that like a lot of people have the buffer in their lower anyway, just as a thing to push the bolt forward, and that's really not a big deal. And then as far as 9mm uppers go,
Yes.
the Matador Arms upper works with either the KP-9 or the KP-15 with the Han block installed. So, you know, that upper and also can work with a whole bunch of different magazines too, depending on how you configure the lower to work with it.
So there may be other uppers we don't even know about. Is that fair?
So there's other things out there like the Jackal, like we've talked about before.
We saw that.
The Jackal will fit on there, but the Jackal ships with a big aluminum plug that goes in the back of your receiver that covers the sides. So you could put a Jackal on and it would function, but we would need to make a dedicated block to cover the sides of the Jackal upper, so that you're not seeing the exposed internals at the rear. I didn't prioritize doing anything for the Jackal because it's such a heavy upper that it just kind of, to me, didn't lend itself well to this. If we get enough feedback that people want Jackal compatible ones, like, we can look at doing that.
What was the other one we heard a lot about? CMMG?
CMMG Descent. Similarly, it would require a different back plug, and that one would be a little bit easier to do. Theirs has an aluminum thing that sticks up above here when you put it on a traditional AR-15 lower. But again, I didn't do anything for CMMG initially because I don't know a lot of people using those that don't just buy a complete gun.
But it could be done.
It could be done.
What about SIG?
Same thing, it would require its own dedicated block, the MCX upper.
Okay.
And again, part of the reason I didn't prioritize that is it's very expensive. So in working on this initially, we made these to work with the commonly available, relatively inexpensive uppers that are $500 to $800.
Sure.
Where the MCX is a lot more expensive than that.
Okay, so just to reiterate, FM products or BRN 180 for 5.56 right now.
Right now, yes.
If someone wanted Jackal, CMMG, or SIG, pretty much enough people should ask for it for you to justify doing it.
Correct.
And on the 9mm, Matador Arms.
Yeah, Matador Arms.
Or 22 on.
Correct.
To go. What other stuff did we see a bunch of? Was that it?
We had a lot of people asking about the regulatory aspect of this.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this one.
So there's
a pistol brace, all that stuff.
Yeah, so a KP-15 is just a receiver legally because the Gun Control Act of 1968 states that a rifle must have both a buttstock designed to be fired from the shoulder and a barrel. A KP-15 by itself with a fixed stock is not a rifle. It's never been a long gun legally until you install an upper on it.
So the confusion was when we saw in the questions, people was like, is this a pistol lower or a rifle lower? And the truth is it's neither. It's a lower.
Right.
It doesn't become a pistol or a rifle until you configure it into one of those two things.
Correct. So it's all about what you build it into. These are sold as receivers. You must be 21 years of age or older to purchase them. And then you have to build it into something that complies with your local laws.
But if you wanted to buy the lower and make a pistol build, you could.
Yes.
But the minute you put a rifle upper on it, technically it's now a rifle.
Yes, it's now a rifle. And there's one of the things ATF's changed their mind back and forth about is like, if I build it into a rifle, can it be back into a pistol? We know definitively if you build it into a rifle first before it's a pistol, it can never be a pistol.
Yes.
You could turn it into a short-barreled rifle through the NFA process.
Right.
But you can't turn it into a pistol. If you build something initially from a receiver or frame into a pistol, then it can be a pistol.
So the precedent seems to be you can go longer, but you can't go shorter.
Correct.
So if you made a pistol first and then decided, I'm now going to make this into a rifle, you could do that.
You could do that.
But you can't go the other way.
Correct.
But the point is, the lower itself, the receiver, is neither. There is no pistol receiver. There's no rifle receiver. It's just a lower receiver. It's what you do with it once you acquire it.
Right. And that's kind of an artifact of, the Gun Control Act of 1968 defined these terms.
Yeah.
The 4473 didn't reflect frames, receivers, and others until 2008.
Yep.
So there's still a lot of lore out there about pistol receiver versus rifle receiver. A receiver is a receiver because the characteristics of a rifle and a pistol legally are very clearly defined in statute and has to have all of them to be that.
And of course, all this brace stuff just made it even more confusing to people.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. I think that was all the questions, like the big ones.
Yep.
Well, there we go. Anything you want to add?
Well, I'll be using this gun with a different optic at Woodland Brutality coming up. And like everything I make, you're going to keep seeing me use it on my channel here.
Cool. Well, hopefully that makes sense to you now that you understand more about, if you were interested in this folding stock variant of the KP lower. Hopefully that addressed all your questions.